I thought I was about to spend a perfect Christmas with my family, but instead, I walked into an empty house with nothing but a note and a sinking feeling in my chest. My daughter, Sarah, and her family had run off on the vacation I had paid for $17,000 and didn't even have the decency to tell me face to face. Part of me wanted to scream. The other part felt like I was already in a nightmare, and there was no waking up. I had spent months planning this trip, thinking it would heal the cracks that had been forming in our relationship since her divorce. I wanted them to feel appreciated, to enjoy the holiday. But the cold, harsh truth hit me like a freight train. They had already planned to leave me behind, and they thought I wouldn't notice. Now, before you think I'm just some naive old man, let me tell you a little about myself. My name is Julian Herrera, and I built everything I have from the ground up. 40 years of hard work, sacrifice, and long nights to create a life of comfort for myself and my family. A business that turned into a legacy. But apparently, none of that mattered when it came to my daughter's loyalty. I wasn't just her father. I was the one who bailoed her out, paid her bills, covered the mortgage on her house, and helped with her wedding. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought they appreciated me. But after what I overheard, I knew I had been nothing more than an ATM to them. The conversation I overheard on the phone that day will haunt me forever. My daughter, Sarah, never realized she hadn't hung up properly. I could hear her voice, cold and calculating, as she discussed their plans. "We need to get rid of him," she said, as though I was just some obstacle in the way of their happiness. "He's too much of a burden and I can't deal with it anymore. We've got the vacation to look forward to now, and we won't even have to deal with him. The house will be worth more soon. We can sell it and buy that new place we've been eyeing." When I heard that, my world shifted. It felt like my whole life had been a lie, like I had been living in a fantasy while they plotted my downfall behind closed doors. I stood there in the middle of the kitchen, numb. A sharp pain hit me in my chest, but I didn't have time to cry. I had been betrayed by my own flesh and blood, and there was only one thing I could do next. I didn't waste time thinking about it. I didn't need to. I grabbed my phone, called the resort where I had booked their dream vacation, and within moments I began the process of canceling every last reservation. If they thought they could use me, they were going to find out just how wrong they were. What happened next? Well, that's where things really start to get interesting. If you want to find out what happened when I cut them off, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on the rest of my story. I'm about to show you exactly how far I'm willing to go to take back control. I didn't waste time with empty words. I didn't sit around sulking about their betrayal. I had already made my decision. I was done being their punching bag. I was done being the guy who kept giving only to be taken advantage of. Each call I made to the resort, each cancellation felt like a small victory. Spa appointments, canceled. Private chef, gone. Ski lessons, not on my dime. It was like striking their names from my will every single decision. And it wasn't just about the money. It was about power. It was about reclaiming my dignity. Here's where you need to really pay attention. If you want to know how the rest of this unfolded, how I finally stood up for myself and made sure my family learned a painful lesson, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next. By the time I finished canceling everything, I was already feeling lighter, like the weight of their manipulation had been lifted off my shoulders. But that was just the beginning. The real moment of truth came when my daughter called me, panicked, desperate to know what I had done. She was crying. She was begging, but it was too late for apologies. She had made her choice, and now she would have to live with the consequences. You won't believe the shocking twist that came next. After I told Sarah that everything was canceled, the conversation took a turn. Want to know what happened when she tried to turn the tables on me? Subscribe, because this is the moment they truly learned who they were messing with. By the end of it all, I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their love. I had something far better, my self-respect and the power to decide how the rest of my life would play out. I walked away from that phone call knowing I had finally broken free from their manipulation. The betrayal was a harsh lesson, but it was a lesson I would never forget. And as for them, Well, they learned exactly who Julian Herrera really was, and that, my friends, was just the beginning of a much larger plan. I was still pacing around the house, the anger and confusion simmering inside me when my phone rang again. I didn't need to look at the caller ID to know who it was. Sarah. She had called 4 times since I hung up, each call more frantic than the last. I let it ring. The voice on the other end didn't sound like the daughter I had raised. It was shaky, desperate, almost pleading, but it didn't matter anymore. She wasn't the same person I had known. "Dad, please, this isn't what you think," Sarah's voice cracked as soon as I picked up. She was crying now, trying to make it sound like everything was going to be okay. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear the same lies she'd told me 100 times before. I didn't want to hear the fake apologies, the explanations that meant nothing. My heart had already been shattered once, and now I had to pick up the pieces. "You planned this, Sarah," I said, my voice steady, but ice cold. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You and Matt and his parents, you all conspired to take my money and leave me behind. All those years, everything I've done for you, and this is how you repay me." She stammered, clearly taken off guard. No, it's not like that. We needed some time away. It was supposed to be a family thing. We didn't mean to hurt you." The more she spoke, the more I realized how far gone things had become. It wasn't just the money anymore, it was the manipulation. It was the betrayal at the core of it all. I felt the weight of it all pressing down on me, but I also felt something else, a sense of clarity. This was the moment everything changed. I wasn't just going to sit back and let them do this to me. I wasn't going to let them use me and then cry when things didn't go their way. "I gave you everything, Sarah," I said, letting the words sink in. "You think I can just forget everything I've done for you? You think I'll just let this slide because you've got a sad story to tell? Well, guess what? I'm not that man anymore." I could hear her breath quicken, panic creeping into her voice. "Dad, you're being unreasonable. This is not what it seems. We're just a little overwhelmed right now. Let's talk about it when we get back. We can fix this, I swear." I hung up. No more talks, no more fixing anything. It was too late for that. As I sat down at my desk, I felt the anger boiling beneath my skin. I wasn't done with them. No, this was just the beginning. I wasn't going to let them get away with this betrayal. It wasn't just about the vacation or the money anymore. It was about the way they had treated me. It was about the lies they'd spun and the way they'd made me feel invisible in my own family. I opened the drawer where I kept the legal documents for all the money I had lent them over the years. The apartment loan, the wedding payments, college tuition. It was all there, neatly filed away, ready for this moment. I had always kept everything just in case, and now the moment had come. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for them to come back and apologize. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. I grabbed the folder labeled loan documents and started reviewing each one carefully. There were 5 loans, all with terms and conditions they had agreed to. I wasn't just going to call them out on it, I was going to take action. I opened my phone, dialed Robert Morgan's number, and when he answered, I didn't even let him greet me. "Robert, I need you to prepare the legal documents. I'm calling in the loans." There was a long pause on the other end. "Julian, are you sure about this? It's Christmas, for God's sake." I didn't flinch. "I'm sure. Prepare everything. I want the apartment loan called in, the credit cards canceled, and all the guarantees I signed to be revoked. I want them to see exactly what happens when you betray someone who's given you everything." He was silent for a moment. "Julian, you realize they're going to come back and they're going to be furious. They won't take this lying down." "Let them be furious," I said. "They'll learn what it means to cross a line." I felt a sense of purpose as I hung up the phone. This wasn't just about me being upset anymore. This was about standing up for myself, for the person I had allowed myself to become, and for every single sacrifice I had made that had been taken for granted. I didn't know how far this would go, but I knew I was done being the one to keep giving. done being the one they could walk all over. Now it was time for them to understand what real consequences felt like. But what was most shocking, what I hadn't expected at all, was the way they would react when they realized that I wasn't the man they had thought I was. If you want to find out exactly how they responded to the legal actions, make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you won't want to miss the fallout when they found out the game had changed. This is just the beginning of their lesson. The moment they underestimated me, that was their first mistake. But the real shock came when they realized the consequences of messing with a man who knew his worth. I didn't waste any time after that phone call with Robert. The decisions had been made and there was no going back. I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders, but at the same time, I knew things were only going to escalate from here. The moment I clicked send on those cancellation emails, I knew I was crossing a line. But there was something liberating about it, something empowering in finally taking control. For the next few hours, I busied myself with the one thing that had kept me grounded through all these years, my meticulous organization. I went through every receipt, every financial document, everything that had tied me to them for the last decade. The apartment loan documents were pulled first. I looked at Sarah's signature on the line, a signature that meant something different to me now. It wasn't just a commitment to repay, it was a reminder of everything I had given them. Every dollar, every sacrifice, every opportunity I'd extended, gone. But the part that stung the most was looking at the wedding receipts. $65,000, and I had done it without a second thought, thinking I was giving her the wedding of her dreams, thinking I was making her happy. In that moment I understood. I had been foolish. The money meant nothing to them. It was just a tool to manipulate me, to secure their future while they slowly erased me from their lives. I was so wrapped up in my thoughts, in my action, that I didn't even notice the phone ringing until it was too late. It was Sarah again. "Pick up the phone, Julian," she said before I even had a chance to speak. The panic in her voice was impossible to ignore. She had always been able to make me feel guilty, make me second-guess my decisions, but not this time. "Dad, please, we need to talk," she begged. "I don't understand what you're doing. You can't just cancel everything we've worked for. That vacation was important to all of us." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the papers laid out before me. "You had no problem taking my money, did you, Sarah? You had no problem planning this trip behind my back, knowing full well that I'd be footing the bill. So tell me, what exactly did you think would happen when I found out?" There was a long silence. I could almost feel her trying to regroup, trying to find the words to make me believe she was still the daughter I raised. But I wasn't having it. "Dad, we never meant to hurt you," she said weakly. "This wasn't personal, we just thought. It was time for us to move on, you know." "Move on?" The words hit harder than I intended. "What, you thought you could just take from me and leave me behind without any consequences? You're wrong, Sarah. You're very wrong." There was a hesitation before she spoke again, her voice now trembling. "You're not being fair. You can't just do this to us." I took a deep breath. Fair. Fair would have been you treating me with the respect I deserved. Fair would have been you not planning to leave me out of Christmas like I was just some afterthought. You don't get to be upset, Sarah. You made your choice. Now you'll face the consequences. I hung up the phone before she could respond. I was done with the apologies, done with the pleading. I had spent too many years giving them everything, and all I had gotten in return was their manipulation and disrespect. I picked up the legal papers again, scanning the loan agreements, looking at each figure, each line. That's when the phone buzzed again. This time it was Matt. I couldn't even bring myself to listen to his voicemail. I knew what it was going to say. He would try to talk sense into me, try to make me feel guilty. But I was beyond that. The moment they left me alone on Christmas morning, they forfeited any claim to my pity. The phone continued to buzz throughout the evening, but instead of answering, I focused on something more important, the next steps. I wasn't going to just stop with the loan cancellations and the revoked credit cards. No, I was going to make sure they understood the full scope of what they had done. The truth was, they thought I was just some old man with money, someone they could use and discard at will. But what they didn't realize was that I had spent years building a legacy. I wasn't some fool they could easily manipulate. The moment they made the decision to abandon me, I decided to make them feel the weight of their actions. I didn't know exactly what form that would take, but I knew one thing. I was going to make sure they understood the price of betraying me. This wasn't just about money. This was about respect. And once you lost my respect, you lost everything. As I went to bed that night, I could hear the phone ringing in the other room, the missed calls piling up. But I didn't care. It was over for them. The game had changed, and I was finally playing by my own rules. If you're wondering what happened next, how Sarah and Matt reacted when they realized what I had done, don't miss the next part of my story. You're going to want to know how their world came crashing down, and trust me, it's coming. Be sure to subscribe to hear the rest. I woke up the next morning with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. The house was quiet. I'd gotten used to the constant buzz of my phone, the endless calls from Sarah and Matt trying to apologize, but today, the silence felt different. It felt like a weight had been lifted. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't worrying about them. I wasn't wondering how long I'd have to keep sacrificing for their happiness while mine took a back seat. Now it was their turn to face the consequences of their actions. The day dragged on, and I tried to distract myself, but every minute felt like it was building up to something. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. I could feel the tension creeping up on me, and I knew it was only a matter of time before they tried to reach out again. The phone kept buzzing, but I ignored it. This time, I wasn't picking up. Not for them. Not anymore. I had already done what needed to be done, canceled the vacation, revoked the loans, canceled the credit cards. But it wasn't enough. I couldn't just leave it at that. They had to understand the full extent of their betrayal, and I wasn't going to let them off the hook so easily. No, I was going to make them pay for every cent they took from me. And I was going to make sure they learned that there are consequences when you betray the people who love you. I walked into my office, the room where I had kept track of everything, and pulled out the manila folder marked Family Finances. Inside were years of receipts, agreements, promises made and broken, loans given, and gifts that had turned into expectations. The weight of it all hit me hard, but I pushed it aside. I needed to focus. I grabbed the phone again and dialed Robert Morgan's number. "Julian," he answered with that calm voice I had known for years. "You okay? You've been quiet since yesterday." I didn't hesitate. "I need to know if I can take further action. I'm looking at the receipts, Robert, and I want to know if there's more I can do to get back what they owe me. The loans, the wedding payments, all of it." He was silent for a beat. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" "Absolutely," I replied, my voice as steady as it had been when I'd made all the other decisions. "They think they can walk away from me without facing any repercussions. I'm going to make sure they know exactly what it means to cross a line." Robert paused. "Okay, we can proceed with the legal side of things. There's a lot more I can do if you're ready to go down that road. But Julian, this could tear the family apart. You sure about this?" I didn't flinch. They made their choice. Now it's my turn. I hung up and sat back, letting the reality of it sink in. I wasn't just angry anymore. This wasn't about an emotional response. This was about justice. They had stolen from me, and I was going to make sure they never forgot that. A few hours passed, and the phone calls came in again. Sarah, Matt, Richard, and Linda. I let them ring out one after another. There was nothing they could say that would change anything. They had already shown me who they really were. Now they had to deal with the consequences. It was late in the evening when Sarah finally left me a voicemail, her voice shaky, the words tumbling out in a panic. "Dad, please, we don't know what's going on. The hotel's telling us everything's been canceled. The spa appointments, the chef, the ski lessons, everything. Why would you do this to us? We need to talk, please just pick up the phone. Let's fix this." I didn't call her back. The next morning, the doorbell rang. It wasn't a normal ring. It was insistent, urgent, like someone was standing on the other side, waiting for me to answer. I had a feeling who it was. My gut told me it was Matt, maybe Richard, trying to do damage control, trying to get me to undo the damage I had caused to their perfect little world. I walked slowly to the door, my mind already made up. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. The doorbell rang again, and I opened the door without hesitation. There they stood, Matt, Richard, and Linda. Their faces looked like they had been to war and lost. Their eyes were red, their clothes rumpled from traveling. They looked like people who had been shaken to their core. I wasn't moved. I wasn't going to let them make me feel sorry for them. "Dad, we need to talk," Matt said, his voice tight with frustration. "No, you don't," I replied, my tone flat. "You had your chance to talk when you left me on Christmas morning, when you took my money and abandoned me. Don't think for a second that I'm going to just let that slide." Sarah's face appeared in the doorway behind them. She was standing there, her eyes wide, her expression pleading. "Dad, please, we're sorry, we didn't mean to hurt you. We were just overwhelmed and we didn't know how to handle it. It was all a mistake. Please, let's fix this." I stared at her, not a flicker of emotion on my face. "You made your decision, Sarah. You made your choice the moment you decided to leave me behind." Her eyes filled with tears. "Please, Dad, this isn't what it seems. We've learned our lesson. We're ready to make it right. We can fix this. We can be a family again." I stepped back, crossing my arms. "A family? You're standing in my doorway asking for forgiveness after everything you've done to me. No, you've shown me who you really are. I've given you everything and you took it. But you can't take my dignity." Matt opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. "No, you don't get to talk anymore. I'm done with all of you." I turned my back on them, and as I walked away, I knew this wasn't the end. They hadn't seen the last of me yet. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. The power to walk away, to make them feel the sting of their own betrayal. If you think you know what happens next, trust me, you don't. What came after their visit? Well, you'll want to know. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned. This isn't over yet. The next few days felt like a storm had passed over my life, leaving a strange kind of quiet in its wake. The phone calls from Sarah, Matt, and the others didn't stop, but I refused to answer. I was done with their excuses, their apologies that came too late. They had shown their true colors and there was no going back. But even in the silence, I could feel them circling, waiting for me to crack, to relent. I wasn't going to. I had made up my mind. One afternoon, while I was sorting through some old papers in my office, the doorbell rang again. This time I didn't even bother to get up. I had a feeling who it was. No surprise when the voicemail notification popped up almost immediately after. It was Matt. "Dad, we're sorry," he began, his voice tight with frustration. "You have to understand, we didn't plan it this way. This isn't us. We just couldn't think straight. Please, we need you to help us get back on our feet." His words were a mix of desperation and guilt, but I wasn't moved. I didn't care anymore about their broken promises or their pitiful excuses. I wasn't the fool who had supported them all these years just for them to turn on me. No, they weren't getting away with it this time. Then Sarah called. The message she left was different from the others. It was frantic, pleading. "Dad, please, I'm begging you. Matt's worried. I don't know how we can fix this, but I promise we will. I don't want to lose you. Please just talk to us." Her voice cracked as she said the last words, and something in me almost gave way. But then I remembered their faces the day they walked out on me. I remembered the way they had laughed at me behind my back, plotted against me, thinking I wouldn't find out. No, there was nothing left to fix. I deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. This time, I wasn't backing down, and I wasn't going to wait for them to come crawling back, begging for my forgiveness. It was time to take the final step. I knew what I had to do. If they weren't going to learn their lesson from what I had already done, I was going to make sure they felt the weight of their choices. It was more than just the loans or the canceled vacation. It was everything I had ever done for them, every dime, every favor, every ounce of effort. It was time to make them understand what it meant to take advantage of me. I sat at my desk, staring at the papers in front of me. The loan documents, the canceled reservations, the records of everything I had ever done for them. And then something caught my eye. It was the wedding receipt, $65,000. I knew it was time to get Robert involved again. I needed legal action now, not just the cancellations and the revoked loans. I wanted more. I wasn't going to stop until they had to face the full consequences of their actions. I was done being their safety net, their bank. If they wanted to tear everything down, they would have to deal with the aftermath. I picked up the phone and dialed Robert's number once again. "Julian," Robert answered. His voice was cautious, like he already knew what was coming. "What's going on now?" "I need you to file a claim against them," I said. "The wedding loan, the apartment loan, all of it. I want everything that's mine back. This goes beyond what I've already done. It's time they understand that they can't just take from me and walk away." There was a long pause. "Are you sure about this, Julian?" he asked, his voice heavy. "This is going to escalate things. It's going to hurt your relationship with them for good." "I'm not asking for their forgiveness anymore, Robert," I replied, my voice unwavering. "I'm done being their ATM, their free ride. They'll never take from me again." The line was quiet for a few moments before Robert finally spoke. "All right, Julian, I'll start the paperwork. It'll take a few days, but I'll have it ready." I hung up the phone, the weight of the decision sinking in. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about showing them that they couldn't just walk over me. They had crossed a line, and I was going to make sure they knew exactly how much that cost. Later that evening, I received a call from Richard. Of course, he wasn't calling to apologize. No, he was calling to ask for help. "Julian, we need you to reconsider. We've been through enough. Please, just let us make it right." I let the words hang in the air for a moment. "Richard, you're late. You all had your chance. You made your choice. I'm not going to help you anymore. You wanted to cut me out, and now you'll have to live with the consequences." "Julian, this is insane," he said, his voice rising. "You're going to destroy us over a mistake." "A mistake," I repeated coldly. "A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. A mistake is a misunderstanding. What you did to me was deliberate, calculated, and now you get to deal with it." Richard's voice faltered. "But we're family, Julian. We've always been family." "You stopped being family when you decided I wasn't worth your respect," I replied. "Don't call me family now. You can't take my money and then expect me to keep giving. You all made your choice." I hung up the phone and felt a strange calm wash over me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just done. The phone buzzed one last time. I looked at the screen. Sarah. It was the same pleading tone as before. "Dad, please, I know I messed up. We all messed up, but this isn't the end. We can fix this. I love you." I didn't answer. Instead, I turned off my phone and sat back in my chair. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. It was over. They would have to face the consequences of their actions, and I was no longer the person they could manipulate. This was my life now, and if they wanted to be a part of it, they'd have to earn their place. If you want to find out how Sarah and Matt reacted to the legal actions, trust me, it's something you won't want to miss. Stick around and be sure to subscribe for the rest of this shocking story. Things are just getting started. The days that followed felt surreal, like I was moving through a fog. I had made the call to Robert, and now everything was in motion. The legal papers were being prepared, the claims filed, and the fallout was beginning. It felt like my life had split into two realities, the one where I kept giving and giving, and the one I was now creating, where I was taking back control. I spent my mornings in the quiet of my office, going over every file, every receipt. The weight of it all was starting to feel overwhelming, but I didn't let it stop me. I couldn't afford to. I wasn't the man who sat back and let life happen to him anymore. I was the man who made decisions, who took action. And this time, the consequences would be mine to dictate. Robert's office had been in touch, confirming that they were ready to move forward. The claim was official now. The loans were in the process of being called in, the credit cards revoked. Everything I had worked for, every piece of financial security I had provided them was being erased, and it was exactly what they deserved. But still the phone calls came, every day. At first they were apologetic, almost too polite, like they thought I would simply cave in if they begged long enough. Then, as the days passed, the tone shifted. The apologies turned into accusations, and the accusations turned into threats. It was Sarah this time. Her voice, though familiar, sounded alien to me now. Cold, frantic, desperate. "Dad, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this has gone too far. You're going to ruin everything. You're going to destroy us. We didn't ask for this. You're not being fair." Her words were like a sharp knife twisting in my gut. I could feel the familiar pang of guilt creeping up, but I pushed it down. They had done this. They had made their choice, and now they had to deal with the reality of it. I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. I didn't answer her call. Instead, I stood up and walked across the room to the window. The house had never felt so quiet. I used to love the sound of their laughter, the bustling energy that filled every corner. But now, the silence was deafening. The emptiness of it all felt heavier than I expected. I tried to focus on the task at hand, but my mind kept drifting back to those moments. Those precious moments when I thought they loved me, when I thought I was doing the right thing by supporting them. The weddings, the vacations, the college tuitions, all of it. I had done it because I believed in family. I believed in making their dreams come true, but they didn't care about that. They had used me, and now they would feel the consequences. The doorbell rang, and for a split second I hesitated. I knew who it was. The same faces, the same desperate eyes trying to fix things, but I didn't open the door. I couldn't. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Matt. "Dad," he started, his voice tight. "We don't know how much longer we can keep this up. You've taken everything. You've stripped us of everything we had. Do you really want to see us on the street? Is that what you want?" I let the words hang in the air for a moment before speaking. "Do you really think I care about you losing everything, Matt? You made your choice when you decided to take advantage of me. You thought you could use me, take my money, and leave me behind without consequences. Well, now you're learning the hard way. This is what happens when you betray someone who's given you everything." There was a long pause, then the sound of Matt's voice, strained with emotion. "We never wanted it to be this way, Dad. We just didn't know how to deal with it. Everything's falling apart." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you abandoned me," I said coldly. "You made your bed, now lie in it." I hung up the phone without another word. The room felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in on me. But it wasn't guilt that was creeping in this time. It was clarity. I knew what I had to do. I had already made the legal moves, already shut off the financial faucet they had been feeding from. But there was something else I needed to do, something that would send a clear message. They had thought they could walk away, thinking I would be the same person, the same old dad who would keep bailing them out. I wasn't that person anymore. I grabbed my phone and dialed Robert again. "I need you to draft one more document," I said without preamble. "This is going to hurt them more than anything else. I want to revoke my will. Everything I've done for them over the years, every dollar I've given, every loan I've extended, I want it all voided. If they think I'm going to keep giving after all this, they're mistaken. I want them to understand that when you betray someone, there are consequences." I could hear Robert's hesitation through the phone. "Julian, are you sure about this? Once you revoke your will, there's no going back. You'll be cutting them out completely." I didn't hesitate. They made their choice. Now I'm making mine. Robert didn't argue further. "I'll get the paperwork started." I hung up, a strange calm settling over me. This was the final step. The message would be clear. They could no longer rely on me. They had thought they could take from me without ever paying the price, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. I turned off my phone and walked into the living room. The house felt more like a mausoleum than a home now, empty, cold, but it was a reflection of the truth that had finally dawned on me. I didn't need them anymore. They had taken everything I had to give, and now it was time to let them face the consequences of their actions. And as for me, I was finally free. If you want to know how Sarah and Matt reacted when they realized their worst fear had come true, trust me, you're not going to want to miss this next part. Things are about to get even more intense. Subscribe to see what happens next. It had been a week since I made the call to Robert to revoke my will. A week of silence from Sarah and Matt, and as the days passed, I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth of what I had done hit them like a freight train. The phone calls had stopped, but the tension in the air remained, thick and suffocating. They were waiting for me to crack, waiting for me to feel the weight of their guilt and apologies, but I wasn't going to. Not anymore. I had taken the hardest step I could. I had made sure they would never have access to what I had built, to the resources I had given them, ever again. And it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about respect. It was about standing up for myself and showing them that loyalty was a two-way street. The doorbell rang again, and I felt a strange sense of calm. They thought they could break me. They thought they could make me doubt my decision, but they had underestimated me. They had no idea who they were dealing with. This time, I knew I wasn't going to let their emotional pleas get to me. I didn't even hesitate when I walked to the door. This was my house, my life. I had worked hard to get here, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me, not even my own family. I opened the door, and there they were, Sarah, Matt, Richard, and Linda. They looked the same as they had before, but something was different in their eyes. It was like they were finally seeing me for who I really was, not the man they had been able to manipulate for years. There was fear now, real fear. "Dad," Sarah said, her voice shaky. "We need to talk, please. We've been trying to reach you. We've been calling, and we need you to understand. This isn't how we wanted things to go." I crossed my arms and stared at her. "No, Sarah. This is exactly how you wanted things to go. Don't think I don't know what you've been up to. The lies, the manipulation. This isn't just about me being upset. This is about you all thinking you could just take from me and walk away without any consequences." Her face faltered, but she pushed forward. "Please, just hear us out. We didn't plan any of this. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We made a mistake. We should have talked to you first. We should have been honest with you." I let out a dry laugh. "Honesty? You should have been honest when you took my money for that vacation, when you used me for everything I had. Now you're asking for my forgiveness. It doesn't work like that." Matt stepped forward, his face tight with frustration. "We never wanted to hurt you, Dad. This was never about the money. This was just. We didn't know how to ask for space, for time. We thought maybe a vacation would help, but we messed up. We're sorry." I shook my head. "Sorry doesn't cut it anymore, Matt. It doesn't bring back the years I spent thinking you cared about me. You don't get to play the victim now. You made your choice." Richard, who had been silent until now, spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. "Julian, we're family. We've been through so much together. You can't just cut us out like this. We've all made mistakes, but family is family." I looked at him, my gaze cold and unwavering. "Family? You stopped being family when you decided I wasn't worth your loyalty. You thought you could take advantage of me, and I let you for too long. But not anymore. Not this time." Linda, who had been holding back tears, finally spoke. "Julian, please, don't do this. We're sorry, all of us. You've always been there for us, and now we need you. Please don't shut us out. We want to fix this." Her words hit me differently than I expected. There was a part of me that still cared, a part of me that wanted to believe they could change. But the reality was different. They had made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. I wasn't going to keep forgiving them for using me. "I'm done," I said, my voice steady. "You all had your chance. You made your choice when you abandoned me, when you thought you could take from me without ever facing the consequences. I've been trying to be there for you, but you've taken everything I gave you and thrown it back in my face." I turned away from the door, leaving them standing there. The silence in the house felt louder than their voices. I could feel their eyes on my back as I walked away, but I didn't care anymore. They needed to understand. This was the price of betrayal. They had crossed a line, and now they were going to see just how far I was willing to go to protect myself, to protect what I had worked so hard for. That night I sat in my office, reflecting on what had just happened. I couldn't deny that a part of me still wanted to fix things. I wanted them to realize how much I had done for them, how much I had sacrificed. But that part of me was gone now. They had crossed a point of no return. The phone buzzed again. It was Sarah. I let it ring out, not even bothering to listen to the voicemail. They could try to guilt-trip me all they wanted. They could cry, beg, and scream, but I knew what I had to do. I had done it already, and they had no idea what was coming next. If you're wondering how they reacted to my final decision, trust me, you won't want to miss the next part. The fallout is just beginning. Stick around for what happens next. It's going to be a game changer. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out. The days after I cut them off felt like the calm before a storm. The phone calls stopped, but the sense of anticipation never left. I knew they were out there, probably talking amongst themselves, trying to figure out what to do next. It was only a matter of time before they made their next move, but I wasn't worried. I was prepared. I had already taken the most difficult step. The legal documents were filed, the revocations were in place, and there was no going back. What they didn't know was that I had already planned for everything, every move they might make. I spent my days in the same quiet rhythm, the one I had finally come to enjoy. The office was my sanctuary. The house, once filled with the noise of their demands, was now peaceful, almost serene. I had time to think, time to focus on my life instead of theirs. And for the first time in years, I wasn't worried about what they thought of me or how they would manipulate me. But then, out of nowhere, a letter arrived. It wasn't the usual kind of letter I would expect. It wasn't a formal notice or an apology. It was a plea, a desperate, heartfelt plea that made my stomach drop when I read the first few lines. It was from Sarah. She wrote about how much she missed me, how everything had fallen apart without me, how Matt was struggling, and how they didn't know how to fix things. The letter was filled with regrets and promises, but it wasn't just the words that hit me. It was the tone, the desperation, the guilt, the raw emotion. I could feel it, even in the paper. She was playing on my emotions, trying to get me to feel like the villain in this whole thing. She wanted me to believe that everything could go back to normal, that everything would be fine if I just let them back in. I stared at the letter for what felt like an eternity. Part of me wanted to pick up the phone, to call her and hear her voice again. But then I thought about the way they had left me, the way they had planned everything behind my back. No amount of pleading or remorse could erase that. The damage was done. There was no going back. I put the letter down and picked up my phone. This time I didn't call Sarah, I didn't call Matt. Instead, I dialed Robert. He answered on the first ring. "Julian," Robert's voice was calm, but I could tell he was waiting for me to speak. "What's on your mind?" "I got a letter today," I said, my voice measured but with a hint of frustration. "From Sarah. It's filled with guilt, promises, and desperation. I don't know what they expect from me anymore." There was a pause before Robert replied. "You know, Julian, there's no going back after this. You've done everything you can. You've made the legal moves, it's all in motion. They can't force you to take them back. They can't manipulate you anymore." "I know," I replied, "but part of me wonders if I'm doing the right thing. I still care about them, you know, despite everything they've done. It's hard to just cut them off like that." "I get it, Julian," Robert said softly, "but this isn't about what you feel anymore. This is about protecting yourself. You've done enough. If they truly wanted to fix things, they would have come to you before it got to this point. They're just trying to get back what they lost, but you're not the one who should be making the sacrifice anymore. They are. I was quiet for a moment, letting his words sink in. He was right. I had given them everything I could. I had given my time, my money, my support, and what did I get in return? Betrayal, manipulation. They had taken from me for years, and I had let them, but no more. "Thanks, Robert," I finally said, my voice firm. I needed to hear that. I hung up, my mind clearer than it had been in days. I didn't need to second-guess myself. I had already made the right choice. I was done being their fallback, done being their safety net. I had to protect myself, and I had to stop enabling their toxic behavior. Later that evening, there was a knock at the door. I had a feeling I knew who it was, but I didn't flinch. I didn't hesitate. I had made up my mind, and there was no going back. I walked to the door and opened it. There stood Matt. His face was red, his eyes tired as though he had been up for days. He was holding something in his hands, a small box wrapped in a ribbon. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, holding the box, looking at me with a mixture of regret and pleading. "Dad," he said softly, "please, we can't lose you. We messed up, okay? We're sorry. We know we hurt you, but we can make things right. We can fix this." I looked at him, at the man who had once been my son, and I saw nothing but a stranger in his eyes. His words were empty now. They meant nothing. I had heard them too many times before, and each time they only dug the knife deeper. I shook my head, my gaze never leaving his. "No, Matt, you can't fix this. You made your choice. You walked away from me, and now you're going to live with that." He opened his mouth to say something, but I raised a hand to stop him. "You've taken enough from me. I'm done." The box in his hands was a last-ditch attempt to buy my forgiveness, I knew that. But it wasn't about the box. It wasn't about the apologies anymore. It was about the betrayal, and I wasn't going to let that go. Matt stood there, frozen, for a long moment. I could see the confusion in his eyes, the realization settling in. He was about to lose everything, and he finally understood that there was no way back from where they had taken things. "Goodbye, Matt," I said, my voice steady. I closed the door without waiting for him to respond. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding, but this time it wasn't out of fear. It was out of strength. I had finally done it. I had taken control of my life, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me again. If you're wondering how Matt and Sarah reacted after this, how they tried to pull themselves together after realizing they had lost everything, trust me, the final confrontation is just around the corner. You won't want to miss it. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned. The days that followed Matt's visit were quiet, but the silence was suffocating. I kept expecting a knock on the door, another desperate plea from Sarah or Matt, or even from Richard and Linda. But nothing came. The phone stayed silent, and the air around the house felt heavier, as though it was waiting for something to shift. But I wasn't waiting. I had done what I needed to do. I spent my time thinking, reflecting on everything that had brought me to this point. How many years had I spent giving them everything? How many times had I sacrificed my time, my resources, my very sense of self to keep them happy, to keep them from falling apart? I thought about all the weddings, the vacations, the loans, and the promises. And in the end, it wasn't enough. It would never have been enough. They took and took and took. And when I needed them the most, they abandoned me. I was done being that man. The man who gave and gave, never asking for anything in return. The man who let his own worth be defined by the demands of others. But there was still a part of me, a small voice, that wondered if I had gone too far. Could there have been another way? Could I have found a way to forgive them, to let it go? But deep down, I knew the answer. No. There was no going back. They had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to keep allowing them to walk all over me. Then, one afternoon, as I sat in my study reading through some old letters, I got a call. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked up anyway. It was Robert, my lawyer. "Julian," he said, his voice calm but urgent, "I've got some news for you. It's about the claim we filed." My heart skipped a beat. I had been expecting this for days, but hearing it from Robert made it all feel real. "What has happened?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "They've hired a lawyer," Robert said, his voice heavy with the weight of what he was about to say. "Sarah, Matt, and the others. They're trying to contest the revocation of your will. They're going to fight it in court." I sat back in my chair, the news hitting me harder than I expected. I wasn't surprised, but the reality of it all still stung. I had known this was coming. They wouldn't just let me go that easily. But still, hearing it out loud made everything feel more real. "Do they really think they can win?" I asked, trying to mask the frustration in my voice. "It's going to be a tough battle, Julian," Robert replied. "They're going to argue that your decision wasn't made with sound mind, that you were emotionally compromised, and that they deserve the inheritance you left for them. They'll do whatever they can to manipulate the situation." I took a deep breath, the weight of it all settling on my shoulders. This wasn't over. They were going to fight me for everything I had worked for everything I had given them, and I had to be ready. This was no longer just about them taking my money. This was about proving that I was in control of my own life, that I wouldn't let them continue to use me, manipulate me, or tear me down. "Prepare everything," I said, my voice unwavering. "I'm not backing down. I've made my decision, and I'm going to see this through." The next few weeks felt like a blur of legal jargon and preparations. Robert had arranged for everything, and we were ready for the fight. But the truth was, as I sat in those meetings, going over the details, I realized that it wasn't about the money anymore. It wasn't about what they were trying to take from me. It was about something deeper: my dignity, my sense of self, and the recognition that I was worth more than they ever gave me credit for. They thought they could destroy me, that they could manipulate me into giving them what they wanted. But they didn't understand one thing: I was done being their pawn. I was done being their safety net. And I wasn't going to let them tear apart the one thing I had left: my peace. One day, while I was sitting in the living room just going through some papers, I received another call. This time, it was from Sarah. I didn't even let the phone ring more than once before I picked up. "Dad," she said, her voice strained. "We need to talk. I've been thinking about everything. Please just hear me out." I didn't respond right away. I just let her speak, knowing what was coming next. "I'm sorry, okay?" Her voice was shaky now, almost breaking. "I know I've hurt you. We've all hurt you. But I didn't mean to. I didn't know what I was doing. Please, I'll do anything. Please just come back. We need you." For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of doubt, a brief moment of vulnerability. I wondered if this was the moment. But then I remembered. I remembered how they had abandoned me, how they had plotted behind my back, how they had taken everything and never thought twice about it. "I've already heard enough from you, Sarah," I said, cutting her off. "You've had your chance. I'm not going to keep listening to your excuses. You've made your choice. I made mine." There was silence on the other end of the line. I could feel the weight of her shock, the realization that I wasn't going to give in. "Goodbye, Sarah," I said, my voice firm. I hung up, and for the first time I felt a sense of closure. The weight that had been hanging over me for so long was finally lifting. The battle was far from over, but I was no longer afraid. I had taken control of my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me again. If you want to see how the final showdown plays out, how Sarah and Matt react when they realize they've lost everything, you won't want to miss the next part. It's going to be intense. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned. The days following my final conversation with Sarah felt like they moved in slow motion. The silence that had enveloped the house after that call seemed almost oppressive. It was as if time itself had paused, holding its breath, waiting for something, for me to crack, for them to give up, or maybe for the inevitable storm to break loose. I had made my decision, and I wasn't going back on it, no matter what. The legal battle was approaching its first hearing. Robert had been working tirelessly behind the scenes, preparing every document, every shred of evidence that would prove that I was of sound mind when I revoked my will. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about making a statement, about standing up for myself. They had taken advantage of me for too long, and now they were going to face the consequences. But no matter how many times I told myself that this was the right decision, there was still a small part of me that couldn't help but wonder what the outcome would be. Would they come to their senses? Would they realize how wrong they were? Or would they keep fighting, trying to tear me down until they had nothing left? The truth was, I didn't care anymore. This wasn't about saving our family. It was about me saving myself. I sat in my office one afternoon, reading through some papers when the doorbell rang again. This time, I knew it wasn't just another call. It wasn't just a plea from one of them to try and fix things. No, I could feel it in my gut. This time, it was different. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew who it was before I even opened the door. Matt. I didn't hesitate. I opened the door and there he stood, his face drawn, his clothes disheveled, his eyes wide with a mixture of exhaustion and frustration. He was holding a small envelope in his hand, his fingers nervously clutching it. "Dad," he said quietly, his voice cracking, "we need to talk." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The last time we had spoken, I had made it clear that there was nothing left to discuss. But there he was, standing in front of me, looking like a man who had lost everything. "Matt, what are you doing here?" I asked, my voice steady, my gaze unflinching. "Please just hear me out," he said, his voice pleading. "I've been thinking about everything. We all have. And I realize how much I've messed up. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I'm asking for one last chance, for all of us." He handed me the envelope, but I didn't take it right away. I just looked at him, waiting. "I don't know how else to say this, but I'm sorry," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "We've made so many mistakes, and I don't expect you to forgive us, but we want to make things right. We want to fix this. Please don't do this." I took a deep breath, my mind racing. There was a part of me that wanted to listen, part of me that wanted to believe him, but I couldn't forget what had happened. I couldn't forget the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. And no matter how much they tried to make it seem like they were the victims here, the truth was clear. They had made their choices. "You don't get it, Matt," I said, my voice cold. "You had your chance. You all had your chance. I gave you everything and you threw it all away. Now you want to come here and pretend like you're the one who's been wronged. No, this is it. There's nothing to fix." Matt stood there, frozen for a moment, his face contorted with disbelief. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. The reality of it finally seemed to sink in. He wasn't going to win this. They weren't going to win this. Not anymore. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said, his voice small. "I really am, but I guess it's too late, isn't it?" I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. I stepped back and closed the door, leaving him standing outside. There was no longer anything left to say. That night I went over the legal documents once more, making sure everything was in order. Robert had prepared everything for the hearing. I was ready, and as I looked over the papers I realized something. The choice had been mine all along. I had given them everything, and they had taken it all for granted. But this time, I was the one in control. This time, I was going to make sure they understood what happens when you betray someone who's only ever tried to help you. The hearing was a few days away, and I was prepared for the battle ahead. I knew they would fight tooth and nail, trying to manipulate the situation in their favor. But I wasn't backing down. I had already made my decision, and I was going to see it through. The morning of the hearing arrived, and I could feel the weight of the day pressing down on me. But as I stood in front of the courtroom looking at Sarah, Matt, and the others, I realized that I had done what I needed to do. I had taken control of my life, and no one could take that from me again. They may have thought they could break me, but in the end, it was them who had underestimated me. As the final gavel came down and the decision was read aloud, I knew that my fight was over. I had won. But more than that, I had finally reclaimed my dignity. I had shown them that I would no longer be the one to bend. And that, my friends, was the final victory. If you want to know the exact details of how the court hearing played out, how they reacted when they realized they had lost everything, trust me, you won't want to miss it. The conclusion is just as shocking as the rest of this journey. Be sure to subscribe to see the final part of this incredible story.